It's tough, seeing your kids struggle in school. You want to help, but sometimes you just don't know where to start.
It can be really hard to know how to help.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into a topic that might explain some of those learning challenges. Visual discrimination. It's
Oh.
all about being able to see and understand the differences between things like shapes and letters.
Letters, numbers, patterns, it really covers a lot.
And you might be surprised just how big of a deal this is when it comes to a child's ability to learn in school.
Oh, yeah. It really underpins so many of those academic skills like reading and writing, math, even just following directions.
So it's more than just being able to tell the difference between a B and a D.
Right.
Like, how does this play out in everyday life?
Well, think about a child trying to read. If they can't see the difference between letters that look really similar, like B and Z or P and Q, decoding words becomes a huge challenge. They might misread words or read slowly, and then understanding what they're reading, well, that becomes really difficult.
I can see how that would be so frustrating for a child. It's almost like trying to put together a puzzle when you're missing some of the pieces.
Exactly.
And I know from some of the research that you sent me that this can be a sign of dyslexia.
Yes, difficulty with visual discrimination is often linked to dyslexia.
Hmm.
And reading isn't the only thing it affects. Think about handwriting. If a child is having trouble visualizing and telling the difference between letters, they might write them backwards or mix up the order of letters in a word.
And their handwriting might be messy and really hard to read.
Exactly. And this is often associated with another common learning challenge, dysgraphia.
That makes sense. It's like their brain is struggling to process those visual details and then translate that information into accurate movements on the page.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So reading and writing, what about math?
Well, believe it or not, visual discrimination can impact math skills too.
Really?
Yeah. If a child can't tell the difference between numbers like 6 and 9, or if they're having a tough time recognizing patterns, it can make learning even basic math much harder, like arithmetic or place value, even fractions or geometry.
Wow, I really hadn't considered how far-reaching visual discrimination could be. A lot of parents, including myself, might just assume their child is not good at a certain subject when actually there might be this underlying skill deficit at play.
That's a really important point, and that's why understanding the role of visual discrimination is so important. It can really help us approach learning challenges in a more informed and supportive way.
Speaking of research, you send over a lot of studies that highlight just how closely visual discrimination and learning are linked.
I did.
Were there any that really stood out to you?
Well, one of the first studies to really drive this point home was by Gibson and Levin back in 1975. They found that young readers who had a hard time with visual discrimination were much more likely to reverse letters when they were reading, which tells us that being able to see and remember those visual details is really important when kids are learning to decode words. But it goes beyond just recognizing individual letters. A study by Airy and Wills in 1987 found that visual discrimination also impacts spelling.
So it's about seeing the whole word as its own unique visual pattern.
Exactly. And the work of Rosanen and Ahonen from 1995 found that early math skills are significantly influenced by a child's ability to tell the difference between numbers that look alike, which suggests that visual discrimination is key to building a strong foundation in number sense and mathematical reasoning.
It's amazing to me how these studies, even ones from decades ago, are still relevant today and really help us understand learning and development.
Oh, absolutely. And one crucial takeaway from all this research is that visual discrimination is a skill that can be developed. The brain is capable of changing and adapting throughout our lives. It's a concept called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity. I've heard that word before. Can you remind me what it means and how it relates to visual discrimination?
So, neuroplasticity basically means that our brains aren't fixed. They're constantly rewiring themselves and forming new connections as we learn new things and have new experiences. So even if a child is having a hard time with visual discrimination right now, with targeted practice and interventions, we can actually help them get better at processing visual information by strengthening those neural pathways in the brain.
It's pretty amazing. It's really empowering to know that, our brains aren't just static.
Right?
They can change and adapt and improve even when it comes to learning challenges.
It's great for parents to hear that there's always hope. But how does this neuroplasticity actually work? Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's think about handwriting exercises. There's research by Schneck and Henderson from 1990 that shows that if we can help kids be more aware of where things are in space,
Like using graph paper. Exactly, like graph paper. That can actually improve their visual discrimination skills. By practicing forming those letters and paying attention to where each line and curve goes, they're training their brains to be more aware of those visual details.
So it's more than just doing the same task over and over. It's about making the brain really focus on all those tiny visual details.
That's it. And there's another study by Blackman from 1984 that showed that if you combine visual discrimination activities with activities that focus on phonemic awareness, which is being aware of the sounds in words, that can lead to even better reading and writing outcomes.
So it's about finding the right mix of strategies to help kids in all these different areas.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get practical.
Okay.
What are some things that parents can do at home with their kids to help them improve those visual discrimination skills?
Well, there's so many things.
Oh, good.
Matching games are a classic for a reason. You can use picture cards, letter cards, even everyday objects, anything that you can make pairs with. Just encourage your child to look really carefully at the details and try find the things that match. It's a simple activity that can be adapted for different ages and what the child is interested in.
I love those spot the difference games too. You know those books where you have two pictures side by side that look almost identical and you have to
Yeah.
find the differences?
Those are fantastic.
It's like a little brain workout.
It is. And don't forget about good old-fashioned tracing and letter formation exercises. Using different materials can make it more fun for younger children. Things like a sand tray or Play-Doh or even finger paints.
That's multisensory learning.
Yeah.
Getting all the senses involved. It really helps those connections stick in the brain. I used to use textured letters when I taught kindergarten, and the kids just loved feeling the different shapes and tracing their fingers over them.
Oh, that's a great idea. And while we're talking about hands-on learning, don't forget about sorting. You can have kids sort all kinds of objects by shape or size or color or pattern. It's a really easy way to help them start to pay more attention to visual details.
And what about board games?
Oh, board games are amazing.
I'm thinking of games like Memory or I Spy. Even that game set. They all require kids to really pay attention to visual information and compare things carefully.
You're absolutely right. Games are just a great way to make learning fun for kids. And the important thing is to give them lots of different opportunities to use their visual discrimination skills in lots of different settings.
So we've talked a lot about the science behind visual discrimination and some practical strategies that parents can use. But I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes kids might need a little extra help, even when parents are doing everything they can at home.
You're absolutely right. If you're worried about your child's visual discrimination skills and how they might be affecting their learning, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Who should parents talk to? Where do they even start?
Well, an educational therapist or an occupational therapist can be really helpful.
Man,
They can do a proper assessment and figure out exactly what your child needs and then come up with a plan that's tailored just for them.
so they can provide those more specialized tools and techniques. And I'm guessing that early intervention is really important.
It is, absolutely. Addressing these challenges early on can make a huge difference for a child in the long run.
If there's one thing you want parents to take away from this deep dive, what would it be?
I think the most important thing for parents to know is that they're not alone. Visual discrimination challenges are much more common than a lot of people think, and there are things that can be done to help. There's support available.
It can be really isolating and overwhelming when your child is struggling.
Yeah.
It's good to remember that there are resources out there.
There are, and sometimes just having a name for what your child is experiencing, being able to call it visual discrimination, that can be a huge relief for parents because it gives them a place to start.
And it takes away that feeling that you're just stuck and there's nothing you can do.
Exactly.
And remember, visual discrimination is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to learning.
Right.
There could be other things going on too.
There might be.
We've covered so much today. It's been great.
It has.
But here's one final thought for you to chew on. If visual discrimination is one key to helping your child learn and succeed, what other skills might be impacting their experience in school? I think it's so important for parents to realize how much they can actually do to help their kids at home. It's not all on the teachers. Visual discrimination might sound kind of complicated, but with a few tools and some creativity, they can make a real difference.
I agree. And sometimes just knowing that there's a name for what their child's going through can be such a relief. It's like, okay, this isn't just something that's wrong with my child. This is a thing, and we can do something about it.
It gives them a place to start. So in this deep dive into visual discrimination, we hope you've learned some things that can help your child. Every child is different, of course, and it's so important to understand your own child's unique strengths and challenges. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep advocating for your kid. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are resources out there to help.
Thanks for joining us.